We have today and Friday for the remainder of the Saga of the Volsungs in Morris's translation. And then we will proceed to Tolkien's Legend of Sigurd and Gudrun. So like the kids the students, in my Norse Saga Myth and Legend class, you'll have the pleasure of reading this story at least twice. They read it 3 times, so take pity on them, all right? But we had left off, I think, last time, making reference specifically to Sigurd's appearance, and we had a word or two to say about how different that description or characterization of him is from much of the rest of the text. And there are only a couple of other passages where these differences are really noticeable, and what seems to happen in the course of the transmission of the tale is that the Icelandic authors at some point have become acquainted with continental romance tradition, right? They have their own native forms of narrative, perhaps we could say, but then they also, quite understandably, read all the stuff that comes from the continent to them as well. And in order to characterize Sigurd in very satisfactory ways from that point of view, they have to talk about his appearance. And you may remember, Sarah, what he looks like.
Isn't he very blonde? Very
Yes, right. This is chapter 22, pages 120 and 121. It's kind of where we ended last time. And what I wanted to draw your attention to very specifically was that he really does begin to look rather godlike. And the characterization of him in terms of his appearance is meant to be taken together with the descriptions of his fame deriving from his deeds. So there seems to be a linkage between heroism and appearance. And most especially, I would ask you to look at the bottom of 120 to the top of 124. Most duly was his body fashioned betwixt height and breadth. And you know, of course, in this translation, there's deliberate archaism. Nobody talks like that, even in the 1870s in England. Most duly was his body fashioned betwixt height and breadth, and in such wise as was seemliest. And this is the sign told of his height, that when he was girt with his sword ground, which same was 7 spans long, as he went through the full-grown rye fields, the dew shoe of the said sword smote the ears of the standing corn. And for all that, greater was his strength than his growth. Well could he wield sword and cast forth spear, shoot shaft, and hold shield, bend bow, back horse, and do all the goodly deeds that he learned in his youth's days. So there's a linkage between his appearance and his prowess, and most especially his height. And I would ask you to make brief note of the significance Tolkien also attaches to height when we get there. I would ask you to remember that in his play about, well, the homecoming of Bergthnoth, right, Berchthelm's son, he mentions the apparent historical fact that Bergthnoth was 6'9", right? And this is based on evidence from his bones when presumably he was dug up and transferred to the tomb where he now rests, I believe in the cathedral at Ely. And so consequently, height as well as attractive or beautiful appearance by whatever standards we're adopting are very significant in conjunction with prowess. And of course, I simply want to lay that on the table as a question for our further investigation. Why does appearance here, and especially height, tallness specifically, why do these things play such a role? All right, the chapters that we read for today, however, are very, very difficult to square with romantic tradition, whereas the characterization of Sigurd in that previous chapter really is derived from romantic tradition, continental romantic tradition. These subsequent chapters where he meets Brynhild, where he then afterwards also meets the children of King Giuki, and becomes betrothed to Gudrun. All of these are very much a component of the native tradition, and that their tone, their forms of representation, their tropes and so on, as well as their conflicts, by and large, seem to reflect rather some older material than a romance. For example, how many times does Sigurd actually meet Brunhild, and under what circumstances? Go ahead if you want, Sam, please.
Twice. He met her twice. The first time.
One might say 3, actually,
Yeah.
but let's go with 2 right now.
Well, the second time was the one that most threw me. I was like, wait,
Wait.
you guys were married. I thought you were married,
That's right.
but you're not.
In point of fact, let's pause over your confusion, because that's very important. Yes? I've said before, and I hope you will recall, that one of Tolkien's fondest narratological tropes is to suggest that his narratives are deeply grounded in oral as well as perhaps conflicting written transmissions. So that there is an era or an aura of the legendary, even and especially in his fiction. What are the definitive sources of his material? And he tries to create verisimilitude in respect to these, but he also suggests that there is an understandable confusion about origins because of the antiquity of the materials. So here too, Sam, there is confusion regarding, or perhaps deriving from, the different transmissions of the material. In fact, in this sequence of episodes where he meets Brunhild for the second time, and you may recall, Joe, why it is, or perhaps you can intuit why it is that Sam is a little confused.
It's because when he talks about it, it's weird because it feels like he does know her, but it also feels like
He doesn't, right? So he approaches her the second time, almost as if he had not met her the first time. And he becomes, for example, heartsick when his hawk lands on her window ledge and he climbs up to fetch his hawk and he sees her in there. And as if he's smitten with love at first sight. Now that much at least, and the particular form that their wooing takes in the second meeting, also has some roots in Romance tradition. So the author is clearly aware of 2 different sources for the material. And he's attempting to blend these 2 different sources, as his own immediate sources also had attempted to do. But they come from different parts of the realm in which the Sigurd story was told. So the first time he meets her is, I would be moved to say, the first time he sees her is the interesting one, because it's not like stereotypical romance wooing. The first time he meets her, in the chapters that we looked at last time, he meets her on a mountain, and he sees, having been directed there by the birds whose talk he understands after tasting Fafnir's blood, he sees from afar, this is page 110, a great light as of fire burning and flaming up even unto the heavens. But when he gets there, there doesn't appear to be any fire, and it doesn't appear that he needs to ride through it. That part of the narrative is simply not present. So, does he in fact see her in 3 different places, first here, then in Limdale, and then subsequently on her fire mountain? Or is the author himself simply somewhat confused about how to represent these locales? And I'm willing to opt for this latter characterization, right? He's got material in front of him that itself is not fully clear and about which he has no clear conception of weaving into a coherent narrative. What should happen, however, is that we recognize, as we spoke last time, that great light as of a fire burning and flaming up even into the heavens as reflective of what Helgi saw when he witnessed Sigrun riding with her maidens, right? This clearly is Valkyrie light. And as we confront Brunhild then, in this context, you will recall we talked about him having to cut off her mail, her armor, because it has become so much fused with her person and with her personality that he really quite literally has to cut it away from her. And if we're to read these things tropologically, the trope would be consistent with other aspects of the story of Brunhild. She tells part of her story, as we mentioned last time, on 112, right? She was supposed or ordered by Odin to choose one warrior. She preferred the other. In defying Odin, she was condemned to sleep as Sigurd found her. But we discover subsequently that she, at that time, had taken an oath to avert the worst consequences of the curse. What exactly had she been cursed to do or to be in addition to sleeping? What is the nature of the curse? When we meet her, she's a warrior woman in armor. She tells a story about having been one of Odin's Valkyries, those who choose the slain, those who haunt the battlefield and take the dead up into Valhalla. She's one of those. And she later tells us she loves battle. So she's a warrior woman. What does the curse entail?
She can never be victorious again.
Right? And that seems to suggest then that what's happened to her as a consequence of defying Odin and therefore violating her role in relationship to him is that she's condemned to be an ordinary woman. Nowhere is this contrast made clearer by tag names than it is between Brunhild and her sister Beckhild, right? The name Brunhild means battle shirt, right? Battle shirt. And that signifies most likely armor or chain mail. Her sister's name is Beckhild, and that would appear to signify bench battle. Her sister Beckhild is very good at womanly things. She can sew, and I suppose she can sit around with the other ladies and make quilts and whatever other things they are condemned to do by their patriarchal society. But Brunhild has had the great and extraordinary liberty to behave like a man. And having violated the conditions of her permission to do this, that permission is removed. And now she's just a woman. So Sarah, if we sit back for a moment and review the phrase, just a woman, what does that tell us about the world this text represents?
Just a woman, they would have to do very domestic duties.
That's right. First of all, a subordinate being, right? And this goes contrary to everything we've been discovering, particularly about Volsung women, right? Women from the family of the Volsungs tend to be rather ferocious, and they tend to behave more like men than like women, typically. So that Brunhild seems, in her warrior persona, to be the perfect wife for Sigurd. And that, we discover, was her intent in taking her oath as she was laid asleep. No one will awaken me, or in the other tradition, no one will come through the fire, except the greatest of warriors, because I will not consent to be any man's wife, unless in a very real sense he is my equal in battle. And she even hints at a certain point that if he, Sigurd, is to be engaged to her, he will have to do her bidding and kill whom she tells him to kill. That's part of it. So we have in front of us a characterization of women named Beckhild. They're bench warriors. They're domestic. They're ordinary. And in many respects, they're uninteresting to the author. The women he likes, although he doesn't trust them, are women like Signy and Brynhild and Sigurd, right? These are the women he likes and admires, although he doesn't trust them, as I suggested. And notice how wise invariably they are. We discovered last time, as we were discussing, what Sigurd wants from Brynhild more than anything else is her wisdom, her lore, right? Her experience as a Valkyrie has taught her things. So on 113, she says, I give you runes of war, top of the page. But I also give you sea runes. How do these warriors get to battle? They're not cavalry, right? They go to battle in ships and then they come ashore with their hordes. I give you word runes. It will not do not to have the power of words. And she says runes are special, most particularly because they can be carved on objects. Why is that significant? They can be carved on objects. Joe, what do you think?
I think it means that the Vikings didn't consider the runes to have any power at all unless they were inscribed onto something.
Right? They transmit that power by their visible token. Yes? So, for example, a famous sword would have its name, because all of these swords have names, and it might very well have also its maker's name inscribed on it in runes. And the handle might very well, as the handle of the sword in Beowulf, be inscribed also with runes of power, spells that would, for example, prevent the blade from breaking, etc., etc. So runes, particularly carved on objects, have great power. And here we see one of numerous attractions for Tolkien that these matters would certainly have had. He loves the written word. He loves symbols. He certainly develops his own system of runes for the Lord of the Rings, and he actually uses Germanic runes in The Hobbit. And these inscriptions play significant roles throughout his texts. All right, so in the meeting on the mountaintop, which may or may not involve fire or merely the appearance of fire, right, because it's not clear, they plight their troth, as the old-fashioned expression has it. They declare themselves to each other. And then Sigurd goes forth adventuring, and this creates the opportunity for him to meet Brynhild the second time, more akin to romance tradition, where he sees her in a window, is immediately smitten, becomes heartsick, and says, I feel bad, he tells his friends, because I saw this woman and I love her. And one of his friends, the son of the king there at Himdale, page 124, says of her, in the middle of the page, none has ever yet been known whom she would let sit beside her. Because apparently neither Sigurd nor she has told anyone that he sat beside her on the mountaintop. Or to whom she would give drink. Forever will she hold to warfare and to the winning of all kinds of fame. So even though Sigurd has awakened her, even though they have plighted their troth with one another, she has not become an ordinary woman. She still is and wishes to be a Valkyrie, a warrior woman. So he presses himself upon her in her chamber. He has great daring. And we might also say he has some precedent to follow. And so she lets him sit down next to her in a place she says is reserved only for her father. So a place of great honor and one very restricted for its occupants. But she does welcome him. She does give him drink, which is an important ritual here, right? He takes her to him, puts his arms around her neck and kisses her and says, thou art the fairest that was ever born. All this probably from romance tradition. But Brunhild said, "Ah, wiser is it not to cast faith and troth into a woman's power, for ever shall they break that they have promised." Wait, that doesn't sound like the same person from the mountaintop. She's telling him it's not a good idea for them. It's not a good idea. He said that day would dawn the best of days over our heads, whereon each should be made happy. Brunhild answered, "It is not fated that we should abide together. I am a shield may, and wear helm on head, even as the kings of war, and them full oft I help, neither is the battle become loathsome to me." Just because we dimly remember you woke me up on the mountaintop out of my enchanted sleep, don't assume that I want to become Beckhild. I don't. She goes on to say, in response to his complaint that he'd suffer without her, she says, "I shall gaze on the hosts of the war kings, but thou shalt wed Gudrun, the daughter of Giuki." So already at some stage here, her foresight has come to her. Her rune lore, her wisdom have pointed her towards the future, and she says this is what will happen. Now we know about Sigurd already. He's already heard all this from his uncle. Although the details aren't given at that, he already knows all this from his uncle. And he answers, "What king's daughter lives to beguile me?" Now, Charlie, who can ask a question like that? What is the mentality that says, "What king's daughter lives to beguile me?" I'm afraid we would have to say that is very naive. And whatever other qualities Sigurd might have, full-blown political maturity would not be one of them, right? Because really, he's getting more and more deeply involved in the affairs of men at the political level. Hitherto, he's been sheltered at the court of the kings who took in his mother, gave him a home when he was born, fostered him honorably, treated him like their own child, gave him whatever he wanted. And if he was involved in political intrigue at all, it was of a much more familiar, shall we say, Germanic kind. His foster father's desire for revenge against his own brother, right? Now, as we go forward to chapter 25, we meet the Volsungs, right? The children of King Giuki, a group of people for whom you also needed your printout with the genealogy, right? Yes. And they all, for the most part, have names beginning with or containing prominent G's, right? Just as the Volsungs tend to have names with Sig in them. And when we meet them, we suddenly step, it seems to me, out of the realm of myth and legend and saga into quasi-history and politics, right? That has not played a really significant role hitherto. Think of all the conflicts that have happened before now. They are regional dynastic struggles, battles for revenge, all fought in limited locales to limited ends. Now we meet people who scheme for the long term. Now we meet people who lay plans within plans. Gudrun is the daughter of Giuki. She too does not yet seem to be, and of all the women in the story who are not simply Beckhild, she is the one who has the most to learn. Because she starts out as a pampered princess. And she has a dream one night, she says, about a hawk. It turns out to be a more elaborate dream than that. But because she's a princess and has a certain degree of liberty to ride abroad, she and her maidens are permitted to go seek Brynhild, page 128. Because Brynhild is renowned for reading dreams. We have learned that she is foresighted, yeah? And so the fact now, we discover, that she can read dreams as well does not seem altogether implausible. You were going to offer or ask, James?
Yeah, when we first meet the Goo Kings,
Yeah.
we hear of Uthli and Akli.
Yes, that's right.
Are they related
No.
to the Goo Kings or just related to
No,
Brynhild?
no. I'm glad you asked that because, in fact, in the second paragraph on 127, what is significant there is that Budli is a king mightier than Gilki,
Okay.
right? They will become entangled, and Brynhild will be a major strand in their entanglement because Budli is the father of Atli and Brynhild, right? So, in this version of the legend, Brynhild is the sister of Attila the Hun. With me? Okay, all right. So that's why that's there. That establishes a kind of ranking of power and prestige among families that are going to come into conflict. And the link will be Brynhild. So thank you for asking that. So let's pay a visit to Brynhild, and let's see what she will say about my dream. But as is typical in meetings of this kind, you don't just broach the main subject right off the bat. Hi, Brynhild, I'm here to talk about my dreams. You got 5 minutes or so? No. You got to sit down. You've got to eat a little. You've got to have some wine. You've got to have some inconsequential chit-chat. And then you can broach the subject. So they talk actually about stories of mighty kings. And they compare kings whose reputations they know. And Gudrun says, well, you're talking about all these other guys. What about my brothers? To which the answer is very interesting. What is it about her brothers that prevents Brynhild from saying they're numbered among the mighty kings? They haven't done anything. They're inexperienced. They are as yet relatively young and not terribly famous. So the talk seems to be then about, or to constitute, a sort of preamble to the subject of the dream. Because what we're interested in is mighty heroes. So I had this dream. We're talking about these kings. And there is this guy in the middle of the page named Sigurd, who is better than your brothers. He's already done amazing things. He's killed the dragon Fafnir. He avenged his father's death, slew the sons of Hunding, and he's still a young man. Your brothers haven't done anything like this. And as she talks about Sigurd, Gudrun's ears prick up, and she realizes something very significant. Leah, what is it?
She was dreaming about Sigurd.
Yeah, right. That's what emerges, right?
Yeah.
But Brynhild is talking about Sigurd because she loves Sigurd. And Gudrun figures this out. So the rivalry between them, the groundwork for that, is already laid for us right here. I dreamed like this. There was a deer. It has nothing to do with the hawk, she says she dreamed of, right? It has nothing to do with it. I dreamed there was a deer and he was golden. And I got him. But you, Brynhild, shot him and he died at my knees, page 130. And such grief was that to me that scarce might I bear it. And then afterwards thou gavest me a wolf cub, which besprinkled me with the blood of my brethren. Yeah, ow, is exactly right. Not a happy dream. And if it is in any way prescient, a dream revealing the future, then Gudrun's future is grim. Brynhild tells her, I will read thy dream, even as things shall come to pass hereafter. Almost the very words of Sigurd's uncle, right? For Sigurd shall come to thee, even he whom I have chosen for my well-beloved. And Grimhild, your mother, shall give him mead mingled with hurtful things, which shall cast us all into mighty strife. Him shalt thou have, and him shalt thou quickly miss. And Atli the king shalt thou wed, and thy brethren shalt thou lose, and slay Atli withal in the end. Now, Danielle, I might speculate at this moment that Brynhild's sort of sadistic, and that she's making this up as an interpretation of the dream in order to scare Gudrun away from any contact with Sigurd. That's what a calculating person, in fact, might very well do. But this is the truth. Gudrun at no point says, I don't believe you. What she does say is grief and woe to know that such things shall be. She doesn't say, that's one possibility. Here's some potential futures, right? Like moderns, right? Here's how the strands go. Could be any one of them. That's what moderns do. But these medieval characters sit back and say, I believe it. This one prophecy, this prescient dream, as you interpret it, is true. And to me, it is grief and woe. Go ahead.
They don't think they can ever change fate.
Also true. Yes. Nope, they don't think they can change it. Unlike moderns, right? Who on some level both believe and do not believe in fate, right? We tend, if we were to characterize it in the briefest possible form, we as moderns tend to think of fate, if at all, as some challenge that's put ahead of us which we can overcome, right? It's more like an obstacle. But these people see it as the prescription of their lives. And their attitude towards it is not altogether unlike our attitude in that they're willing to struggle. But they know that they will fail. Fate will prevail. What then is their incentive to go forward? Are they now just then simply the hapless puppets of a destiny which drives them along as no more than a stream would drive animals?
I don't think so. I think that what drives them, even though they know this, is that they know how it's going to end, but no one's told them what's going to happen in between.
Right. So, for example, they're like Achilles in Greek legend, right? About whom it is prophesied that he will die at the siege of Troy, and he will die a young man. And he's given a choice, I always love to tell this story. He's given a choice in many versions of the narrative of his life. He's told either you can hide yourself away, stay out of the fighting, and grow to old age, but win no glory or fame. Nobody will ever remember you. Or you can die a young man in battle and be remembered forever after. And here we are talking about him in 2016. We did remember, in point of fact. And he made the choice that made him famous. James.
It's funny you bring up Achilles. I was thinking of that because there's a similar dichotomy with Sigurd.
Mm-hmm.
That we have a life of the domestic
Yes.
life and a battle life in the form of two different women.
Yes?
Although he picks the domestic life and dies for it. whereas
Well, he's
Achilles-
tricked into picking it, yes. Right. So, there's this dimension in which the fate that is set out before us is an outcome. In Sigurd's case, a death and a few other details in between. Some confusion about women, things of that sort. But knowing his future from his uncle's foretelling onward, and having been told also now by Brynhild that their romance is not going to go as planned, he nevertheless repeatedly says, I'm going ahead with my life. And the implication would be, I'm going to win renown in spite of my fate by resisting my fate, though it will ultimately prevail. And that leads us then, ultimately, to discussions of such matters as fatalism. To what extent are the Germanic, late Germanic, characters here represented as being burdened by a sort of fatalism? To what extent is that fatalism itself an engine of their own destruction and destructiveness? Do these prophecies, from our point of view, become self-fulfilling, as it were? Within the text, of course, there does not seem to be a clear indication of any such possible interpretation, because the author or authors are at great pains to offer rationales for the things that occur. So, Sigurd goes out on adventures. He's betrothed to Brynhild. They've said ecstatic things to each other. She's given him her learning, and he has not forbidden her to be a Valkyrie, to be a warrior woman. And they seem made for each other. If ever a woman was born to be Sigurd's mate, if ever a man was born to be Brynhild's mate, surely this is what we're looking at here. The perfect couple. But he's riding into politics. He's riding into dynastic long-term ambitions, here also represented primarily, but not exclusively, by a woman. A woman named Grimhild, Gudrun's mother. Go ahead.
Does Hild mean battle?
It does, yes.
So she's masked battle?
She is terrible battle. Terrible battle. Right? Terrible battle.
It's not gonna name my firstborn daughter.
Terrible battle, yeah, that seems quite honorable to me.
That is your mother-in-law.
Are you good? Sorry?
Dad, that is your mother-in-law.
Yes, well, that's the real problem, isn't
Terrible.
it? A terrible battle is your mother-in-law, the battle axe.
Yes.
So we have in front of us now Sigurd the Naif, wedded, if not formally, then ideologically, to a Valkyrie, empowered by her, his status enhanced by his connection to her, and having been told by her that he will betray her, he says, "No, I will not. What king's daughter could seduce me?" And he rides right into the middle of it. Right into the middle of it. And they see him coming. And Grimhild thinks, what if I wed my daughter to Sigurd and he becomes a member of our family? What has he got going for? We know he's really tall. He has a very long sword. What else?
He's got all that treasure.
He's got all that treasure that he won from the dragon. He also has renown. He also has a list of battles he's been in that just by themselves would inspire terror in the enemies of the Gukums. So he is an asset viewed from every possible point of view except his connection to Brynhild. What can we do about that? He's already pledged to another woman. What can we do about that? You're Grimhild. You have very large, long-term dynastic ambitions for your family. What would you do? Go ahead.
Me.
Yeah.
Well, I also have magic, so.
And don't call me Grimhild for nothing, right? So I am, in addition to everything else, an enchantress. I am a mistress of herb lore and enchanted drinks. And she gives him one. She carries it to him in all innocence of apparent intent. Page 132. About 10 lines or so, 3 paragraphs from the top. Great joy we have in thine abiding here, and all good things. Excuse me. Will we put before thee to take of us. Lo, now take this horn and drink thereof. And those words should have an echo for you. Go ahead, please.
Is that the voice poisoning against the Volsungs.
Yes, you remember Sinfjotli was poisoned by his stepmother under somewhat similar circumstances, right? She brings him a drink in all apparent innocence of intent, and she won't quit until he drinks it. Sigurd isn't even as wary as his older half-brother Sinfjotli. And he just takes it and drinks it. What are women for if not acting as Valkyries? They're to bring us men drinks. So of course he just takes it and drinks it. What else would he do? But what exactly is the effect? Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
He forgets all about his
Yes, that's its intent, right? He is to forget about Brynhild. There's no connection with or memory of Brynhild. And eventually they put it to him after a year and a few months, 5 seasons, we're told. I got a sister, buddy. And my sister is the fairest of the fair. Stay here with us, become part of us, and you can have my sister. Yeah, what does that look? But I mean, you're obviously, if I may read, you're obviously responding to the casual nature of giving away one's sister in a dynastic plot. But we've already seen that's an aspect of conventional relationships in this world. Kings give away their daughters in marriage for purposes having nothing to do with the daughter's own wishes. Though wise men who know their daughters well will at least ask them, what do you think? Do you think you can take this guy for all of the reasons I'm laying out? To which a wise woman who is foresighted might say, no, he's horrible. Or a wise woman who has dynastic understanding might say, well, this could be a good match. Let's go for it. But at least she's been asked. Here, really, she's not asked. There is some question in the text about the extent of Gudrun's knowledge of things at this time, right? She's kind of passive, she's kind of a pawn, she's a bit of a Beckhild, if I may refer again to that trope. And it seems that she's not really in on the plotting. It's only later that Sigurd himself makes her aware. Notice that at top of 134, for example, the end of chapter 26, he gives her a piece of Fafnir's heart to eat. Why does he do that? Go ahead.
To make her the greater of wisdom.
Yeah, exactly. What he wants and what he seems to have some dim echo of in his otherwise lost memory. A woman who is his equal. What a very curious tension in these narratives, a tension that will make its way into Tolkien's narratives too. And that is the desire of a man for a woman who is at once submissive and brings him drink, but who is also his equal. How in the world can you reconcile such things? You can't. So the tension regarding women in this story that helps in part to inform the stories that Tolkien will tell is between Beckhild and Brynhild. Which do you really want? Do you want a woman who is your equal? Or do you want a woman who will not appear publicly to be your equal, only privately? Who will do the conventional things in front of everybody else, but in private will be my equal? This tension is ultimately irresolvable, and the tragedy of Sigurd and Brynhild and Gudrun, and in fact all the rest of it. This is one of those stories where everybody dies, you understand? Eventually everybody dies. No spoilers there, you knew this was coming. All right, so now what to do about Brynhild, because she's a treasure too. And it's time to get Gunnar a wife, right? Gunnar's got to have a wife. He's beginning with Sigurd's help to be great in everything. They're winning wars, they're accumulating treasure. Sigurd's as happy as a clam in a pearl bed. And what we've got is the perfect situation for screwing it up. Because there's Brunhild out there waiting for Sigurd to return, even though she knows at a distance what's going on. So meanwhile, she has hidden behind a wall of flame. And though she's not now sleeping, she seems to abide there. And when they go to woo her, of course Sigurd has no memory of having wooed her twice before. And they're there for Gunnar. And Gunnar has to ride through the flames to get to her. Go ahead. He can't. First of all, I mean, we'll cut him some slack. His horse won't go. All right, so try Sigurd's horse. Sigurd's horse won't go either with Gunnar on his back. So what do you infer from this? Go ahead.
This is the kind of trial only Sigurd can do.
Sure, that's exactly right, right? It's not meant for Gunnar. So that already we have come upon a significant stumbling block which will prove the tragic fulcrum for this portion of the tale. The only person who can go through is Sigurd. He's already Brunhild's beloved, but he doesn't go through as Sigurd. He goes through as Gunnar. How does that happen?
They change skins.
Something that the Volsungs seem to have a history of, right? But in this case, Grimhild had taught them how to do it. Why of all things did she teach them that? Well, come on, she knew what was coming. She knew perfectly well. Gunnar would never be able to ride through the flames, only Sigurd. So he's going to go through looking like Gunnar. And a great deal of bloodshed is going to proceed from that deceit. I'm afraid we must stop now. We're a minute past our time. I will see you then on Friday.
You are so great.